Hello and welcome back to the 100 Day Art Challenge. This video is number 75 of 100 and I decided to make this a real-time video. Often I'll make a real-time video if it's around 10 minutes and I feel as though the art making is entertaining enough to watch. In this I decided to do it because even though it's over 20 minutes for the art making, I feel as though the piece is quite nice. I enjoyed it as far as a process, and I feel as though the result is half decent. So not to set expectations too high, but I quite like this piece, and out of all of the work that I've been making, it's hard to make a piece of artwork that you truly do like. I feel as though I'm going to continue with this after the challenge is finished and end up framing it and possibly selling it somewhere if I can find somewhere to exhibit it. So that's why I feel as though it deserves doing justice with a real-time video. For this piece I'm using soft pastels. This is a set of soft pastels that I haven't used before, and it was a hand-me-down set from someone who was no longer making art, and I wasn't as familiar with the colours as I am with others, because usually I have several sets of soft pastels and usually they're so well organised because they're brand new sets. I'm just not very good at using them as often as I should, really practicing with this medium. And I feel as though, because I've spent some time with other mediums like oil pastels and oil paints, I've done a few pencil drawings recently and a few digital sketches, and I feel as though they don't have as much to offer with my kind of input with them as other mediums do. With oil pastels I really have quite a lot to say. With oil paints I feel as though there's quite a lot I'd like to explore. And with soft pastels, this is a medium that I have used before, but I just don't use it often enough. And on this occasion, I found the piece quite enjoyable. Now, full disclosure, this is actually the second soft pastel piece I made. I did film another piece, but it didn't work out especially well. And my initial idea was to publish it going wrong, which I don't mind doing at all. But since then, I thought, what if I continue with it and see if I can change the piece? Because it's in a place where I really don't care to look at it anymore, I may as well experiment with it and see what happens if I push it in a certain direction that I'll only do if I have the space and the inclination to do these types of things where it can seem destructive. And I do have the inclination with this first piece to do that, whereas this second piece that we're watching now, I'm going to be very careful with how I proceed, because I have a couple of ideas of how I can finish this piece off, and that's my intention, is to finish it off in a way which serves the piece and doesn't say too much. I don't think much more needs to be said. Some things can be fairly minimal and say a lot, and this is one of those pieces which I think doesn't really need much more, and I'm quite satisfied with what it's doing. This piece is based on a photograph that I took of a member of the public, and they weren't aware that I took the photograph. So I would love to show you the reference image, but I just don't feel that that would be fair, because I don't know the person who I photographed and they don't know that that happened. So the likeness isn't good enough that they would recognise themselves, and I've changed a couple of things that could affect the person being identified by others. So I feel as though they're protected enough that they're not going to be recognised by anyone that knows them. So as much as I would love to show you the reference, that's not possible on this occasion. Now, I don't know if you can see, but that soft pastel that I just picked up was just basically a dusty grey. and I had no idea what type of colour it was, and when I started pushing it around, it turns out it was an orangey red, which was nice because it added some variation to the colour, but tonally it's the same as the orange. It's no darker or lighter. So it's only for people who are seeing this piece in person and can look at it and appreciate the colour differences. But you can see there it's not offering anything on the camera. You can barely even see it compared to the orange. The camera's not great at picking up the nuances between an orangey red and an orangey orange, so that's why that's a bit lost on the camera. You may be able to see it with the photograph that I upload at the end of the finished piece. But the point also is that when I pick up the soft pastel, I have no idea how dark the colour will be, or what the colour will be necessarily, because they are dusty and old. And as much as you can see some colours in the lid of the box there, in fact that isn't the lid, that's just the box, the contents of it, that's all that's left, and some of them are recognisable and you can identify which colours they are, but others just look like they're grey. And when you pick them up, you can see that it's not grey, but you can't necessarily see exactly what colour is underneath. So it was just a test, really. A test of each of the pastel sticks and hoping that something good would happen. But I didn't expect this piece to be one which I liked. It turned out that I do quite like it. One big mistake I made was a compositional decision that I made to position the face far over to the left. And that's unfortunate at this point, but I think I'll be able to fix that when I continue with this piece after the challenge is finished. My intention is to consider subtle environmental indicators that I can introduce, and if I do that carefully enough, then I think that could be quite effective. The pastels that did react really well on this piece were the ones which were much lighter and much darker. So here I'm using what I think is a white. It's hard to tell until you can see the finished piece, but I'm pretty sure this is a white. So I'm adding the touches of light, and they add quite a lot, as you can imagine. Yeah, this is a white soft pastel, and I'm not being as careful as I would be if I thought this was a piece that I want to preserve, but at this point I just feel as though it's worth seeing what happens, and it's probably better because it keeps me in a playful state when creating these pieces. And usually when you have light hitting the forehead, as I do on the right, it would be on the right of the nose as well, but in the reference it isn't. The light hits the left hand side. So it was an interesting light shadow balance on the reference image. But I think it works quite well for the finished piece, even if it looks slightly inconsistent in those points initially. I'm not sure if you've used soft pastels before, but I recommend using them with pressure sensitivity. So here you can see, instead of pressing down to get a really white, I'm just lightly scrubbing it over the top in order to lighten the orange and suggest light areas on the face that don't have direct light. So there I'm going very light on certain parts, which you'll see in a minute when I move my hand. You can see on the parts of the skin that comes down from the nose to the cheek, the side of the beard, was quite a light white covering, just to lighten the orange, whereas what I'm doing on the ear is pressing down hard in order to get the white highlights to really pop against that orange. So there's good pressure sensitive variations that you can utilize there, and there's much more that you can do which I'm not doing because I'm still not especially skilled at how to use this type of medium. So it's either hard, medium or soft when I use the pressure, and I think there is much more of a spectrum of lights that you can describe with soft pastels than I'm doing with this. And Another thing that you can do is what I'm going to show you here. Because I am now describing the hair of this chap, and his hair is grey with some white highlights, not highlights intentionally, but the sideburns were white and there were a couple of strands of white hair on his head, but otherwise the hair on the top of his head was grey. And there will be a couple of ways of doing that, but the way that I decide to do it is that I don't press down especially hard. I try to keep it chalky. You can see there it's not as bold as the first few lines, and then I'm wiping on top of it with my hand to soften that. Not only that, because that will soften it so it's less white, but I go on top of it again later to darken it once again, and you will see that in a moment when I finish off the hair. But at the moment what I'm doing currently is just adding as broad a stroke as possible, so I'm not getting a point. I'm trying to get it to quite a wide part, the block, a blunt part of the pastel stick, and just stroking it on the paper, and then immediately wiping it with my finger to create a dusty, chalky finish. There is some variation there between the white and what's trying to be a grey, and I've done a couple of strokes of the white hairs there on top, but it's not what it needs to be. It needs to be a distinct difference. Now the sideburns come down, so I'm describing the white hair coming down alongside the ear and then going into the beard. The beard again is varied in how white it is, so it's white, it's not grey, but I want it to be some parts are fluffy, dusty white, and other parts are sharp white. So I'm again going to utilise that same technique that I've used on the hair, but it will work better for the beard. It's more suited to what the beard is like that I'm describing than it is for the hair as it is currently. I have a couple of strokes of orange in the beard. That's not because there was orange in the beard, but it's more of a tonal description. This is a decision that I decided to make. Instead of trying to utilise a different colour, I tried to keep a colour harmony throughout the piece by introducing orange into the blackness there, knowing that I would be using white on top later, so that you can see that orange through the white, and it will describe something which isn't black and it isn't white, and it will give a different tonal description of gaps in the beard. And that's a decision that I'm glad I made. It may have worked better with something else, but until I experiment with the colours or with the application of the pastels, I won't know that. It's one thing which I really enjoy about medium like this, is that it takes experimentation to truly learn what it's capable of doing and what is possible. So here it is where I'm blending now and softening all of these beard strokes. As much as they were nice, and they were nice beard strokes, all of that direction is kept, but in order to have highlights on this white, I need to soften the beard, and then on top to really press down to get some sharper white marks, and that will just create points of interest in the beard which would otherwise be quite a flat white surface. And I think that you'll be able to see here already, where I apply pressure to the white, it is distinguishable from the other points of the beard, and more effective I find on the beard than it is in the hair for what I'm trying to achieve. In order to create balance, I make sure that I apply it to the left and the right hand side of the beard. This is accurate with the reference, but some parts of the reference I will make my own decisions and change what I'm seeing to match the piece. What I'm currently applying is black soft pastel, and it looked kind of like a dusty grey black, so I was confident that that's what it would be, but if it turned out being a different colour, I would have discovered that on my first couple of marks and tried to either remove it or just stick with it and make it work. So that's the black one there that I've just put down. Quite handy to describe parts where I have drawn a bit too liberally in certain areas. And I'm trying to create highlights here, so I'm struggling to find the right tone, and I'm trying to find something which is pink that can describe a warmer part of the face. Again, it's what I consider to be a point of interest when it comes to portraiture, and it is standing out. You can see it's a purpley pink, and or it's a pinky purple, I think is more accurate to say. And against the orange, it does contribute because it is on the cooler side, and therefore it will offer something which the orange doesn't on its own. But at the same time, there are other colours to try and contribute with, but I'm going back in with the black to describe the nostril, which I feel it's done quite nicely there, and the tip of the nose had some interesting diamond of shadow on there, so I'm trying to capture that. It's just like a little lump, and then I'm trying to sculpt down the nose slightly there, just to describe what that looks like to me, as opposed to what was left over from what I created. And then here there's little touches around the mouth, underneath the nose, and if I'm very gentle I can create some kind of shadow coming down from the nose, and also create some texture and some gaps, some breaks in the beard. So as much as it is white and it has highlights of white, it's nice to then interfere with that and create some contrast in the marks that have been made in that area. And that's always the case with every type of art making I've found, whether abstract or representational, is that if you can describe things with contrasting marks, some broad, some fine, some dry and some more wet, then it will all contribute to the visual appeal. Now here's where I finish off the hair. So I have that dusty white that I've rubbed in, and to do the same thing with the white, now I'm doing with the black. It's just to very lightly brush it along to turn that dusty white into a grey. That to me describes the hair far better than what it was when I was trying to use the white to describe the hair, and more accurately, that's what I needed. So it's all coming together quite well. I think the face has quite a lot of character, has some different colours, some different light and shadow areas, some nice design shapes happening, and now I'm just trying to create this patchwork of tones and temperature throughout the face in order to create its humanity and its interest in certain areas that are otherwise flat. You don't have to do this, but I think that if you do spend this extra time to make certain descriptive marks and in creative ways with different colours, then it will become more visually engaging portraits, and people will be able to let their eyes drift along the face and enjoy the variation of darks and lights and the different planes of the face curving and dipping as the pastels are describing. There's obviously more that I could do and I intend to do once this piece is finished, but as it is, I think this is now shaping up, and aside from being too far over to the left, which there's not much I can do about to move it to the centre, but what I can do is to try to rectify the composition in another way and consider what else I can introduce into the piece. Just as here with the ear, I decided to simplify some of the shapes in the ear. As much as the reference did offer more detail in the centre, I think it's much more appealing to have a more simplified ear. And on the neck, instead of just having a flat orange, I feel as though using this black to create a tonal gradation going from the back of the neck to the front will then create this believability of its form. I didn't quite have a dark enough shadow under the ear, so I included that. I think that defines the ear quite nicely, and again I'm returning to this black mark around the mouth because it's only a touch, but to get it right will mean the world to the actual form that it is suggesting as far as the moustache having volume, and that's what that achieves. So this is the piece that I made. I quite enjoy it, and this will be continued with in another video where I'll show how I finish this off, but not for the 100-day challenge, whereas this is the 75 submission. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.